Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Storyboard, the storytelling talk show. My name is Cameron Evesque Davis, the host of said show and the producer. So, what is Storyboard, you may ask? Each week on this show, hopefully, I will be bringing on a guest from the artistic community to talk about themselves, their artistic projects, and what stories are really speaking to them lately. And then, in the second part of the show, we'll be playing a game of Storyboard, a storytelling game for two players that I created myself for the show. By the end of the show, we'll have created a story skeleton together, sort of the basic ideas, beginning, middle, and end of a storyline. And we hope you enjoy watching us create it. So, without further ado, welcome to Storyboard. And welcome back. Our first guest ever, and my guest today is a good friend of mine, Ansel Burch. Ansel is a producer, actor, writer, and singer working on a number of projects based out of Chicago. He produces and sings with the Shanty Shipwreck Show at local Renaissance fairs. He curates the Gateways short story series and podcast for Otherworld Theatre. And his main project is producing and hosting for Starlight Radio Dreams, a comedy variety show about podcasting. So, Ansel, you are now live. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone.
So I have a few questions here. It's kind of my first interview ever being done by myself. I've definitely fake interviewed myself multiple times, but I feel like that's different.
Probably.
But my first question, especially given the sort of times we're living in and this whole nonsense, how are you doing in all of this?
I am managing surprisingly well. I think we are very fortunate in the group that I work with primarily in that we were already an internet thing.
Right. And
we were able to pretty quickly make a transition from our usual course of action into an online sustainable live streaming system, which meant that we were able to continue producing content. We were able to pivot away from what we had already been planning to do and move into something that was going to be online sustainable. And it's actually, in a weird way, meant that we're producing way more content hostably.
I know that feeling, actually, the weirdly producing more, even given the circumstances. Actually, I sort of also do it because it's the only way to keep myself sane. But I'm glad that it's okay for you. I know lots of friends who are, unable to continue basically as far as their art and whatnot. Lots of acting friends. So it's wonderful to hear that there is art still being able to be produced. But speaking of those, for those who don't know who may be watching this, could you explain Starlight Radio Dreams, which is the main thing I introduced you with?
Yeah, my baby, my heart and soul. Starlight Radio Dreams is a comedy variety show podcast about podcasting. So normally, in the times BC, before coronavirus, we would all show up to a theater or a bar and produce the show live in front of an audience. Right. And that meant that we, as a cast, usually about 8 to 10 people would stand in front of the microphones, present scripted material, both shorts, hosted segments with banter, and finally the serials, which are sort of the heart and soul of the whole project. That material was all presented live and recorded, and we would cut those segments apart, and that would be what we released as a podcast. And it was very self-aware in that, unlike a lot of shows that are doing audio drama right now that sort of look back towards 1940s material, like the Thrilling Adventure Hour, we wanted to make it more about today's digital landscape. And so, how are people producing radio shows now? They're podcasting.
They're podcasting, exactly, yeah.
So it's a self-aware look at podcasting. And so we do a lot of homages and
podcast
spoofs
jokes.
of podcasts. Yeah. So like we just did last month an amazing spoof of Lore.
I've heard of Lore. I have yet to actually listen to it, though.
Oh, you especially would love Lore. The only critique I would give is also one of its greatest strengths,
right? Which
is the presenter is so even-toned that it is like...
Even-toned like monotone, or...?
Not quite monotone, just so smooth that it's almost like an ASMR thing.
Just sort of whispering into the mic.
A lot of that, yeah, yeah. So we did a spoof called Bored, in which Carolyn, one of our actors, presented a bunch of true historical stories about things that people did because clearly there wasn't enough to do in their town.
Oh man, I think about that all the time. I need to check that one out. I always think of the John Mulaney quote, actually. I don't know if you know this, but people in the olden times used to wake up and go, "Oh God, it's the olden times."
Yes.
I just think about that a lot. It's why all those, like, they're perfectly willing to sit all day and just like play checkers.
Checkers was the height of entertainment for a long time.
Oh man,
which tells you a lot about why we're doing Twitch right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But I remember one time at Bristol when I worked there, we invented a game that used checkers and just dice, and we made a game that was way more fun than that game in like half an hour. Because I guess like modern game design is just in your head nowadays, as long as you play some amount of things.
That is one of the things that I think is really interesting as you look back to history as a reference point, especially when you're writing a story, because frequently I find when people are putting their characters into a historical or pseudo-historical framework. Well, let's think like a fantasy novel where where your characters live in
medieval.
They're proto-medieval. It's medieval, but they've got compasses because somebody didn't do that part of the research. Which is fine. Like nobody needs to know.
As a D&D DM, I throw in modern stuff all the time, just because I couldn't be bothered with a bunch of other stuff. Like if I had to deal with all the stuff that they dealt with actually in medieval, it would be so annoying.
Most of the game would be about, lancing pestilence boils. And,
yes, like taking a Bible on somebody's back when they have assists. Yes, that's how you solve all problems.
Chasing the dogs from the street so that they don't spread the plague, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
that's just a different game.
As a sword and sorcery game goes.
Yeah.
My sword is my broomstick, and the sorcery is my waving it at the dog.
Yep. But yeah, so I think it's important to remember that there are some things that are like, this took a long time to develop. Yeah. And though now it is for us absolute instinct, it might not have been for your characters. And that's something interesting to play with. And if it's not interesting, don't, because narrative is nice that way.
The point is to be interesting. Yes.
There are no rules. Yeah.
So as far as Starlight Radio Dreams goes, one question I've had about quite a few of my friends who do this sort of style of podcast and style of performance, what got you into radio comedy live drama thing? I'd never heard of that sort of performance until I met everybody from the Ren Fair who does that sort of thing.
And it had this explosion recently, which is really cool. But yeah, so for me, I went to school for theater. I double majored in acting and directing, and English, because that's how that worked.
Yep.
You know,
a few of those people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was like 3 extra classes to get the directing major, and I was like, heck yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, I mean, turns out was a really good decision, because directing is now most of what I end up doing. Yeah. While I was in college, I did some radio. We had a college radio station, as all colleges, I think, are required to do, so that people can talk at no one as though they're on the radio.
Now everybody can make a podcast, of course. Now,
I wonder if colleges still have annoying radio stations.
Mine did. Columbia College had a radio station that no one listened to. I know the radio students.
We've actually been featured on that radio station.
Oh, really?
That nobody listens to.
Well,
some podcasting class was like, what we should do is play a podcast over the radio.
On the radio,
and we were like, heck yeah.
We put some radio in your radio so you can radio while you radio. Yeah,
that's exactly what it was. But yeah, so I did some college radio, as all eventual podcasters have a tendency to do.
Yep.
And that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And so after I graduated, I moved to the city. I started working at the Museum of Science and Industry, which is a really interesting institution in a lot of ways. That's a whole other conversation.
It's an entirely different conversation, but
fascinating
place. Wink, wink.
So much happens there. It is an amazing place and a very interesting institution. But yeah, so while I was working there, I met a group of people who were starting on this project, and the original intention of the project was that it was going to be a theater production. We were going to be live on a stage. There was going to be like cool projections behind us with animation, and they had all these cool lighting things they wanted to do. And at some point in a conversation I was not involved in, all of that stuff went away, and we were like, what if we just did the audio?
Sure. And
I was already on board because I was writing vignettes for it, which is what I had been brought on originally to do, was writing, not performing or participating in a productive capacity at all. So we started doing recordings of just the audio, and it was a really good move. We had an amazing audio sound designer on board. We had an amazing cast of actors. We had some really cool scripts, and a world that had sort of birthed out of somebody getting a little bit too high in college years prior. And
I think so many worlds are created like that, though.
It's the ones that you can't get rid of. That I think that's the trick. I don't remember who it was that said it. It might have been Hemingway who said that you drink for writing. Yeah, you drink alcohol for writing, and you drink coffee for editing.
Yeah. I think I've heard a version of that, which is, you write drunk, edit sober, or whatever. But...
yeah. And so I think the ideas that you come up with when you're drunk or otherwise under the influence that you can't get rid of, those are the winners. Those are the ones that you're like, okay, this is something I got to do something with.
Even stick in a drunk person's brain are the ones that will stick in everyone's brain.
I think that's a really good axiom. Somebody should write that down. Needlepoint that on a pillow. Anyway, so that project became Our Fair City. And Our Fair City is a really cool project that ran for 8 seasons. It is by far the thing I have been heard the most doing. Like if I can claim to be famous in some way, it's that. Like a 250,000 people downloaded every episode in the last season or something like that.
That's a lot. Yeah. That's a decent number of people, man.
That's more people than see most of the things I do.
Yeah, same.
Which is that's a commentary, but hey,
it's hard to get stuff out there. I think my most is Lawless, is the Harry Potter fan film, because I think that's up to 20,000 or something now. But that's
nice. Well, and you did a really good job of creating something that was really fresh in a
unknown
IP that was known. But I think you also hit the right time for that, because it was a lot of us who read Harry Potter as it was coming out are now in the mind for more adult Harry Potter content,
and a divorce,
and the
from
movies didn't give it to us.
Yeah, for sure.
And we need to sort of separate the art from the artist in a way that is very difficult with that particular IP.
It is,
as well,
because she won't leave it alone. But that's a whole other story as well. Yeah. But I mean, it is storytelling, and it's an interesting conversation to deal with. How do certain creators let their stuff go, and versus other ones who hold on to it super tightly and never let anybody do anything with it. I think there was a story I learned a long time ago about Deadmau5. Now I'm not gossiping so much on this show, but the idea is that at one point some kid downloaded FL Studio and used a sample which came with FL Studio that actually belonged to Deadmau5 because it was supposed to be just a sample.
Oh.
A sample. And you weren't supposed to release it at all. And Deadmau5 like sued this 15-year-old kid for it. And I find that sort of thing just a baffling story. I would never once in my life think to do that to somebody. And Rowling is busy inventing stuff about her world. Of course, she's still making the new movies, but I don't know. So as far as what we can create is I like all the stuff where it's taking the ideas of the universe and what we liked about it and making it relatively unique, even if it's like in the world. So that's what I tried to do, at least. Back to you, though. You're the guest.
Yeah.
One other question I had. You mentioned you came from writing and not so much performing as far as going from Starlight Radio Dreams. So I actually sort of cut you off as far as how it got from your big famous thing to Starlight Radio, though.
So a group of us were involved in another project that was also presenting live audio drama,
right?
And came to the conclusion that the stories we were telling weren't the ones that we wanted to tell. And the small group of us, nothing against the other project we were working on,
sure,
just had different stories that we wanted to get out there.
Yeah.
So we left that project, we gave it a little resting time, and we spent that time writing new material and deciding what Starlight was going to be. And that was when we made this decision to, make it more current, make it more about podcasting and less about, this look backwards.
Sure.
We wanted to look forwards, or we wanted to look not forwards
actually
or backwards. We wanted to look at now.
Look at what we were dealing with at the moment.
It was in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so through that, we thought about, what are the tropes that we do want to hold on to? What are the ones that are still relevant today? And then what are the tropes that are not things that we want to include? So we like a lot of shows do advertisements, and we do fake advertisements as well. Mm-hmm. Our fake advertisements are all for podcasts, just the way that if you listen to a podcast, there's going to be like there's a 3-minute promo clip.
Always has that right at the end.
We do fake promo clips. Yeah. Same concept. We cast everything in that mold.
Yeah.
So we came up with this idea that we wanted to sort of bridge the gap between the audio drama of radio style and the podcasts of today. And so for the first 3 seasons, we had 2 hosts. The first host is a Hollywood relic, mm-hmm. Somebody who was from the golden age era, and that's the character I played. And then my co-host Anna played a YouTube star, and that gave us a very specific
the times.
Viewpoint. Yeah. Right. Now we've established it enough that we only have the one host, and the other characters that are around him inform those other viewpoints. So sure. We have a producer, we have an intern who represents our millennial demographic. Yeah. We've got, there are all these different viewpoints inside of the story's universe. And that's just in the presentation. And then those presenters are giving you all of these shorts and serials. And that's how we sort of couch all of it.
So as far as creating the show, is there a head writer, or do you all just work together and each person writes individual pieces, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do. We do write everything individually, and then we come together in the writer's room, or in the rehearsal room, really, and we read out every piece in the order it's going to be produced, and we discuss it as an entire cast. Yeah. And the writers get an opportunity then to do a set of revisions based sure. upon that feedback. Then we do a second rehearsal. The writers get more feedback after the second rehearsal, and they get to do their final revisions. And then we produce the first show. So we do each live show twice. Tuesday's preview is the first time that script has been read in its final condition. At all. Period.
Or at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's the first time those actors have had a chance to read all of those words in that exact order.
Right.
In front of anybody. And then on Friday we do it again, and obviously at that point they've had a chance to do it once, and we've got all the the bugs and gremlins out.
Mm-hmm.
But the bugs and gremlins, I think, is a really interesting.
It's also a great band name.
Experience. Oh man, yes. It's like a prog rock band, right?
Yeah, the Bugs and Gremlins. Each song lasts 20 minutes and also always has this sort of cicada buzz in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They claim it's a choice.
Yeah, mm-hmm. It's actually just
really
their mics suck.
Yeah. One of the cables is janky, and they just can't. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we've been producing it now for going on 5 years. 5 years in September will be the big mark.
So you do 2 shows? Is it monthly? I think.
Yeah, 2 shows monthly. Every month. So it's the same script both times, but yeah, we produce a preview and then the final show every single month for 5 years. Yeah,
that's amazing though. That kind of consistency is like what's so difficult as an artist. Like genuinely, it's so just doing like my D&D game as a podcast is great because now there's like you're actually held to account to actually release something on schedule every single time for an amount of time and indefinite amount of time into the future. So I always have to be there every 2 weeks, release one. And it's like it adds this pressure, but it's great. And as an artist, like I only can really work with deadlines. So if I don't have a deadline, it'll just never get done. But if I have a deadline and I've told people that it's going to happen, then it's going to get done. Like this show, like I actually finished a bunch of shit for this show, like earlier today, because I that's how my brain works. It's like I can't do everything ahead of time. I mean, I did that in college too. I'd always do my homework like the day of the class.
Oh, heck yeah.
But
you've done like a deal with yourself. You're like, okay, I've got that hour before this class.
Exactly.
That's when I'm going to fill out this thing.
Yes, that hour is specifically for Japanese homework or whatever. And yeah, I'm going to rehearse the scene that I have to do literally later that day in the 2 hours after I wake up or whatever.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said for people who plan a lot. And like, I find myself planning more now that my plate is more full.
Yeah, for sure. You have to fit
obviously I have to look a few days in advance and go, okay, that 6 hour block is when I'm going to edit the audio from this thing.
Yeah.
But it will be the last 6 hour block before the thing has to go out.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm still doing those same deals with myself. I'm just doing them a little bit more in advance because I've just got more things I have to do.
Yeah. So very briefly, I'm going to touch on one of the other things that you do, and I've taken part in, which is Gateways, which is sort of a short story reading series and podcast. Would you like to just quickly describe what that is as well?
So Gateways is a short story reading series, just as you said, and it's produced by a local theater here in Chicago called Otherworld Theatre. They are a science fiction and fantasy specific theater company. They host a yearly film festival called the Juggernaut Film Festival, and a few years ago, Gates McFadden came to that show, and
that's awesome.
During a Q&A talkback, I know, right? I'm so sad I missed that.
Yeah,
man. That would have been really cool. So during a Q&A talkback afterwards, she brought up that that we need more places for short stories to be featured so that writers have somewhere to put stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because once you have somewhere to put something, then you're more likely to do it.
And yet again, it's the deadline thing as well.
And then once you have a deadline, you're even more likely to do it.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is based around this idea of like providing an outlet, but also a framework.
Right.
So we present a prompt every month. The writers are chosen from a list of writers who have submitted to be involved. I pick usually between 10 and 13, depending on how pessimistic I'm feeling about them being likely to commit.
Actually send the stuff in, yeah.
Actually do it, yeah. I usually aim for I want to have 8 to 10, but sure. I always figure there's going to be some attrition.
Yeah, you got to plan like that.
Because that's how it is. But yeah, so I pick a group of writers from the list. They are all issued that prompt, and they get 5 days to write. And then after that 5 days, there's usually a very quick turnaround in which the stories are given to local actors who prepare them like a monologue, and then they present those live in front of a theater audience.
Normally.
And much like Starlight Radio Dreams, we record that live show and cut it up and produce it as a podcast. So it's a very streamlined way to get your story from pen to voice to like audience.
Yeah, I mean, I've took part in it because it's genuinely like, I mean, I guess I could, using the internet now, read my own stories if I wanted, but it's so cool to hear it in other people's voices, like how they interpret how your characters are speaking is super interesting for a writer. It helps you like figure out, maybe that dialogue was really awkward, or ooh, they're interpreting that weirdly. Maybe I didn't explain it properly, like how I was thinking. So it's really helpful for the writers. It's fun for the audience and fun for the actors, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think it simultaneously raises and lowers the stakes.
Yeah. It raises it because it has to be in front of an audience, but there are no actual stakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like I, as an editor, am going to come back to you and be like, you need to cut 6 pages out of this and change the thing, and the character's not likable. You know, at most I'll be like, that word is kind of weird, or, you know, I'll just edit something, you know, for syntax in the moment. But like, there's very little challenge to what you want to do. What you want to put out there is what's gonna be put out there, as long as it's not offensive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which, you know, that's
the thing you screen for, but otherwise it's like,
right. And so much of writing, especially writing professionally, is about overcoming editorial nuance and the vagaries of the editing and publishing process.
It's just actually getting something on the page, which I suppose is also like NaNoWriMo's whole thing. Just get something on the page.
And I guess the problem that you face as a professional writer, or somebody who wants to be a professional writer, is, okay, you wrote a novel. No one is gonna buy that novel, because that's not how that's not how the publishing companies work anymore.
Oh, I know.
Publishing companies buy the idea of a novel if they think you can write a novel. And so, like, if you write a novel, you know, you pour your heart and soul into this giant work. The number of outlets for that amazing expression of your art are very minimal, aside from self-publishing, which is, I think, why self-publishing is taking off. And I'm excited to see the new world of self-publishing that I think is inevitable, wherein we take it more seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have a novel out as well. Then there was a lot of... Because nowadays, if you write a novel, you can get it to a publishing company, but you have to have an agent first who then pitches it. And it's this whole process. So it's a lot of you pitching your own work, which is hard anyway for any medium. And it's a lot of hoops to jump through. So it's all, but I'm very glad Gateways exists too. It's always been really fun to listen to people's stories and see what they can come up in like 5 days. So we're nearly over with the interview time, but the last question, and the question I want to ask every time at the end of these interviews, is: what stories in any medium have lately been really speaking to you and making you excited about storytelling?
Such a great question that I outlined 8 bullet points about it. So I'm going to try and summarize.
Sure.
I am a believer in confluence to a certain extent, that, you know, for whatever reason, things are going to come up in your life more frequently sometimes, and that is either it's sort of like an expression of your subconscious in a certain way.
Sure. Like,
I didn't seek this thing out intentionally, but it has become a recurring theme in my life, regardless.
Absolutely.
And whether that was subconscious choice or something in the zeitgeist, it is now affecting me. And right now, that's Greek myth. For whatever reason, I am just bathing in Greek myth now. Lore Olympus is an amazing webcomic. They're coming up on a season finale. And so, like, I had been reading them for a while.
Yeah.
And then I kind of fell out when I think they changed platforms or something.
Sure.
And And so I came back and binged all of it so that I could catch up in time for their finale. I've been listening to this amazing podcast called Let's Talk About Myths, Baby, which is just a delightful. It talks about myths, yeah. And the presenter is a classicist, so she's really well informed on the topic.
Awesome.
And she covers a lot of myth, but she focuses especially on Greek myth because that's what she's most comfortable with. My book club, for whatever reason, for the past 2.5 months we've been reading Circe and the Greek Way by Edith Hamilton. So just everything. And
lots of Greek myths.
Lots of Greek myth. And it's all culminating in a new show that Starlight Radio Dreams is doing.
Ooh.
We've had a long-running series called Olympic Shore that was absolutely fabulous, and it casts the Olympians as trashy.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Trashy reality TV characters.
Yeah,
we're gonna do a spin-off now where the Olympians have been thrown into a different house with some of the Norse pantheon.
Oh, good. I'll be sure to catch that one. That's the shit I do like. So.
That's going to be up your alley. And it sort of has culminated for me because I'm not writing the Olympic Shore spinoff, but I am, obviously producing and assisting with it. The thing that I'm creating that is taking up a lot of my time, and you'll understand, is my RPG setting. I'm about to start a campaign with my weekly group.
Nice. That
is focused entirely on the structure of Joseph Campbell's monomyth.
Oh, all right. Good luck.
So it's going to be a 14 to 17 episode arc in which each character follows the hero's journey as outlined by a different, archetypical character.
What's going to be tough about that is making sure your players actually do that.
Well, and that's kind of the trick is I love spreadsheets for stuff like this. So I've created an enormous spreadsheet of all these different archetypical characters throughout, from Harry Potter to Greek myth to Star Wars to all sorts of different heroes, and how they've faced each of these. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that I can use that to sort of insert a relevant touch point for each character into the relevant episode.
Sure.
So that they get to experience that hero's journey in their own unique way throughout the course of the story.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I wish you luck with that. But we do have to move on. I have posted, for the viewers, links in the YouTube description to the Starlight Radio Dreams website, as well as the website for Otherworld Theatre's podcast thing, which is pretty much all gateways from what I could see. So you can check out all the stories, and you can check out Starlight Radio Dreams. We're going to take a very short break, like a minute, and be back for part 2, where we play the game. So stay tuned. And welcome back, everybody, to Storyboard Part 2. Part 2 of the show that we're doing is where we play the game of Storyboard. This game I created just specifically for the show involves 2 players, a quarter of a pack of cards, and a bunch of tables that I created. So we've got 13 cards total, and we'll be consulting those tables. They will be up on the screen as we play, so you will be able to follow along at home as well. So, we each start by drawing a card each to determine 2 characters who will be central to the story. We'll then draw another card to show an important location, and then one for an important object. If you've ever played Fiasco, this is extremely like that, except streamlined as crap. Just by drawing cards and making it random, it's so you're forced to follow those and create a story around it. We then take 3 turns each, drawing a card and consulting the events table of whichever setting we chose. And that will tell us a thing that happens at some point in the story. It can happen wherever we want it to. And then it asks us questions as to how the characters are involved and how the thing happened. At the end, we'll draw a random card from the final 3 cards we should have. This is the climax card, which will just throw some more chaos into the mix. That is very much like the tilt table in Fiasco, if you are familiar with that game. So, Ansel, let me get out of studio mode and OBS here. Are you ready to start?
I am.
All right. So, for the audience, to the left of me is going to be where I'm placing the playing cards, so you can see that I'm not cheating. Why I would be cheating is beyond me, but it could happen. Up in the upper left-hand corner is the actual stuff for the game. I can edit this as we go. We've got the 2 characters, we've got the location and the object, and we've got the events. I will also be zooming in so you can see that as we play. So, without further ado, we have to choose a setting first. And Ansel, since you are, or a genre rather, not a setting, it's a genre in my game. Since you are our guest, you get to choose the genre. We have 4 genres so far. I've written 4 for the game. We've got teen drama, we've got horror, we've got fantasy, and we've got sci-fi.
Oh, man. I love all of these genres, but I think I am going to go with a science fiction setting, since we just talked about gateways.
I, for some reason, figured you were going to choose sci-fi. But, so great, sci-fi. I have a bit of sci-fi music. Not really, though. I couldn't find very great sci-fi music, but this'll do. But I wanted to have music in the background as we played. It's just
layer some beep boops over anything.
I wanted to do like sort of Star Trek sort of triumphant music. So I sort of found that it works.
All right.
So for science fiction, we have a few tables here. All right. Let me get to my section here. So we've got our sci-fi characters, which, wow, that's not how that's supposed to work. Let me just fix my... there we go. So we've got sci-fi characters, which are all sort of archetypes. We've got sci-fi locations. Don't know why this happened. This is fun. You know, it's always great starting a new project and having one thing just like work on one computer and then not on the computer you're actually using. Isn't that great?
Oh, I see. Yes,
all right,
let's try
so
and edit.
We've got sci-fi characters, which are sort of character archetypes in science fiction. We've got sci-fi locations, which are things I made up that could happen in a sci-fi setting. We've got sci-fi objects, which are science fiction objects, and we've got the actual events that happen or can happen throughout the playing of the game. So the first thing we need to do is start by drawing a card. I'm going to shuffle these here 13 cards. I went with clubs this time. That has no effect on the game. And I just dropped cards everywhere. Which means they'll be.
We are going to start in a club, though.
Yeah, a science fiction club. So we're
10 forward. I mean,
exactly,
yeah.
10 forward. So first, I will draw a card for you. So this is the character that basically you will be maining, although you can bring in whichever character whenever it calls for it. I have drawn the 4 of clubs.
4. The crime kingpin.
The crime kingpin.
All right.
So 4 on the sci-fi table is the crime kingpin. So what's good right now is, as well, you should come up with like a name.
Man, I think I'm gonna go with like Obliterator.
Obliterator. All right, so
that's a good crime nickname.
We've got the crime kingpin, whose nickname is Obliterator, which apparently I can't spell, or OBS, or nope, it's just not a word. Good. So Obliterator is our guy. I'm sensing lots of weird scars, a big beard.
Oh yeah. I think he's got like one of those beards that looks really stupid, but no one can tell him.
Yeah, no one can tell him that.
Really
Maybe
stupid.
It's like weirdly curly. There's a One Piece character that just has endless curly beard. So we've got Obliterator. Now I'm going to draw my character card, which is a 3 of clubs.
The pilot.
Is it the pilot? It's the pilot. Good. I like pilot characters. They can be fun. All right.
They make it easy to go from place to place in your story.
Yes, especially if you're in space, So my pilot character, he's going to be named Mick Ransom. That's what I've got. We've got Mick Ransom, the handsome pilot guy. He still wears a scarf like it's World War I. And
he's definitely called Handsome Mick Ransom.
Handsome Mick Ransom. Yeah, if you put it in like normal nickname mode, it would be Mick Handsome Ransom, which is kind of funny, but I'm gonna go with handsome Mick Ransom. All right, so another thing that is good to do at this point is, as we come up with this initial stuff, just like if you're playing Fiasco, think about sort of how these characters might know each other. I have a feeling that Handsome Mick Ransom works as a mercenary type pilot, so he works for various people, including sometimes Obliterator.
I think that's absolutely the case. And I feel as though Obliterator probably feels as though he owns Handsome Mick Ransom to a certain extent, which Handsome Mick Ransom may or may not agree with.
I feel like Handsome Mick Ransom doesn't agree with that. And the more times we say Handsome Mick Ransom, the more times it's going to be ridiculous and we'll start laughing every time. So that's fun. All right. So next we draw for locations. Let me switch to sci-fi locations. There we are. Get that up for everybody. Now the card that I am drawing here is a 10 of clubs.
10. Planet X555.
X555. Planet X555 is sort of... my dad and I were writing a book at one point, and we had Planet ZX5 or something, so that was sort of a call out for that. So Planet X555, what kind of planet is Planet X555? I feel, is that where Obliterator has his base, or is he somewhere else, do you think?
I think X555 sounds like the sort of place where you would set up a base. It doesn't have a name, which is a really good indication that it's sort of a backwater.
Yeah.
If
in the outer
this were a real colony, it would have a name, but this is just a mining colony that is a front for Obliterator's criminal syndicate.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a mining planet. I like that. It's a mining planet.
We're mining.
You're mining like drugs.
We're definitely not just digging holes to hide all the drugs in.
Nope, definitely not doing that.
Space drugs.
You are Obliterator has a legit mining company that does legit mining.
Yep.
And Handsome Mick Ransom does some deliveries, but he doesn't ask what's in those packages yet.
A wise man never does.
All right, next is a science fiction object. So sci-fi object, I have drawn a 2.
Oh, should we have a second location?
No. So it's all
okay.
one major location and one major object for this game.
Perfect.
So a 2 is an engine part. Now, interestingly, since I am Handsome Mick Ransom, and, pilots use ships, an engine part can throw some problems into the mix for Mick Ransom here. Mick Handsome Ransom. So that's what we've got. Our basic thing is Obliterator, the crime kingpin, whose base is on the mining colony of Planet X555. We've also got the pilot, Handsome McRansom, who always wears a scarf, and he's painted the side of his ship to look like a World War I sort of fighter plane with propellers and stuff. Like it looks like a biplane on the outside, but then you just like get closer, and he didn't do the actual depth of field very well, or his painting isn't great. It looks more
he definitely did it himself.
Yeah, he absolutely like spent an afternoon painting this thing, and he thinks it's brilliant, but other people are like, what you doing? But he sometimes runs jobs for Obliterator as well as other people. And an object that will come into play here is an engine part, which could mean anything, you know.
We use engines on X555, I'm sure.
I'm sure they do exist, yes. All right. So the next part of the game involves us looking at the events table. I will flip back and forth between the events table and the actual events that we're typing in, and I will be typing in what we come up with into that thing as we go, and we can place these events wherever we want. It doesn't have to be chronological in this story. But since you are the guest, you get to start. Also, one additional rule, if you want to and you hate the draw, you can mulligan once per game and reshuffle and get another card. So first thing of this amazing sci-fi story is a 6 of clubs.
Something about the other person draws you to them. What is it?
Yes. So something about Handsome McRansom draws Obliterator to him. What is that?
I feel like Obliterator is the kind of guy... I'm getting like a very Bond villain feel from Obliterator. We went with the scars and the secret base and the very elaborate front, and that feels to me like a Bond villain. And I think the characteristic thing about Bond villains is that for whatever reason, they are just obsessed with outsmarting Bond because they think that he's an equal.
That's right.
And I think that Obliterator feels like Handsome McRansom. Of all the pilots and smugglers that work for him, Handsome McRansom is the only one who's truly his equal, or a fair.
So Obliterator's kind of obsessed with him, and like wants to undo him in some way,
or wants to best him. I think that the more opportunities that Obliterator gets to best an opponent that he sees as an equal, the better he feels about himself.
Absolutely. So that's something that is drawing Obliterator to Handsome McRansom, is this feeling of being an equal and wanting to best them. How that will happen.
Which means he never underestimates him, but there are a lot of blind spots.
Yes, absolutely. But that always is how it works, isn't it? Next, I drew an ace of clubs.
Ooh. Well, that works.
An ace of clubs is the ship's systems are going down one by one. Who is causing it and why? Well, I mean, the ship systems are going down one by one. So this is a scene where Handsome McRansom is just like, he just got done with a, or he's picked up something. Yes, he's picked up something from Planet X555 in this new job for Obliterator. And Obliterator was there like, this new job is quite something, or whatever voice you want to give him.
I like that.
And Handsome is like, oh yeah, I can handle anything you throw my way. And he takes this big crate aboard and sets it in his cargo bay and does this whole like smoke me a kipper, I'll be back for breakfast style send off thing, and takes off into the skies. And as he like exits just the atmosphere, he gets these flashing lights everywhere, and it's like beep beep beep, oh my god, what's happening? And he rushes down, and the crate is like blown open, and there's like something in his ship, and as he's standing there looking at this blown open crate, something falls from the top, and it's like an engine part, which is like I'm going to be very Futurama here, and it's an L unit. It's a very important unit. And so
we need that.
So I'm going to write that here. As Ransom picks up a mysterious package from X555 to the chuckles of Obliterator.
And I totally forgot to set a scene for that answer. So I feel like this is where we like star wipe to Obliterator, who is swiping through files on all of his, people who run jobs for him. And for whatever reason, Handsome McRansom's dossier file is just way more full of stuff.
Yeah, he's got this massive thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Obliterator chuckles. We see Obliterator chuckling about the idea that he's had, and then we swipe back to whatever Handsome McRansom's going to do next.
We see Ransom's dossier in Obliterator's hands. And Obliterator is pleased with his future plan. The box is blown open, and an L unit from the engine falls from the ceiling. Handsome McRansom is not having a good day. All right, so your go. We have a 5 of clubs.
Ooh.
Which is
a new item is brought onto the ship, which causes chaos.
What is the item, and who brought it aboard could be interesting.
Well, we've answered that question, so I think that this is an opportunity for us to dive deeper into that. So I think this is a flashback moment where Handsome thinks back to when the item was loaded on board, and one of Obliterator's goons, Charlie, is like using the little push cart to load the cart up onto the ship.
Sure, Charlie.
And as Charlie is like shoving this like very heavy crate up the ramp, Charlie like chuckles to himself and places a small like timing device on the inside of the door, and so we like see him set that thing on the door frame right around where the L unit is, and then like as he sets the cart down, he faces the crate very like strategically before locking it down, so we can see this like deliberate and complex sort of what's the devices where the ball comes down and
where the ball comes down in the
where like where the ball comes down the track and it bumps against the thing and that sets off this thing. Rube Goldberg, thank machines, you.
Yeah.
There's a complex Rube Goldberg setup.
Of course there
that
is.
Charlie has arranged.
Excellent. So it like has
as he chuckles maniacally and leaves.
It only starts working when Handsome McRansom leaves the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So that's like when something triggers, and then a ball rolls down from the upper part of the cargo bay or whatever, starts hitting things. All right.
Maybe that's how Handsome visualizes it. Like we get that like mind palace depiction behind his head of him. Like, okay, so the ball goes down here. That's this sensor, and then it goes there, and that's how we represent it to the audience.
Mind palace, sure.
So we don't have to explain the science.
Yeah, he's just very good at this. That's why Charlie's on board with Obliterator. All right, so my go. I got the Queen of Clubs. Ooh. Someone important dies. How are you involved? Okay. So I think that Handsome McRansom has a actual sort of business he works for. There's like a Mercenaries R Us that he works for.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And Obliterator is really out to get everything to do with Handsome McRansom. And while Ransom is like calling on his emergency system, he's like trying to contact his boss and stuff, and we just hear Obliterator's voice saying,
"Yes,
there's nothing you can do now. I've got you this time," or whatever. So what happened to my boss? Or what happened to Cynthia, the boss lady? And Obliterator's like, you won't be dealing with her no more. So Cynthia's dead because Obliterator killed her.
Uh-oh.
Ransom calls mercenaries are us. The company.
Now, I think the question, and I don't know if this will come up later, the question is whether Obliterator has taken over Mercenaries R Us or just destroyed it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to explore that. And his boss, Obliterator, tells Ransom we won't be bothering with her again anymore. Yes. Crazy. All right. Next is you again. We've got 2 more of these cards and then the climax, and we can sort of figure it out. The point is a story skeleton anyway, so we're getting very clearly that.
Right, yeah. So we could sketch out each scene and then,
yeah, and fit it all together.
Do the animatics later.
That's exactly right. So I drew the king.
Oh, the king.
The king.
A video log reveals an assassination plot. Who is trying to kill whom, and will it happen? I think this is exactly where this needed to go. Handsome McRansom thinks back to the last time they were in the ops center of the Mercenaries R Us, and there were all these screens up going all around like all the different ops that were going on. Because of course you need a giant monitor wall. That's how you're in an ops center.
Yes.
And we zoom in on one of the monitors that was immediately to his right that he'd taken like mild interest in at the time. And that op was to assassinate the Obliterator. And Handsome, who doesn't think of himself as primarily working for the Obliterator, was like, oh, that's interesting. But now sees that there's, the tables have been turned on that op. And we get like a zoom in on this new character who was heading the op.
Right.
And that one's called Ace.
Ace.
So I think we learn that Ace either is in danger or is about to make the final step on Obliterator.
Oh man.
So now we have existential stakes.
And the question is, did Obliterator figure this out? And is that why Cynthia's dead, or what?
Yeah.
So Ace was on his way, perhaps. Currently, what we have is Obliterator in the Mercenaries R Us place. He somehow went there directly. Like maybe he has a teleportation pad. It's a black market one, so it only works half the time. But he was willing to risk it to get to the Mercenaries R Us place and kill Cynthia. His motivation for that might have something to do with the op, or not. All right. One more of these, and then we can fill in some additional stuff. That's a 9. A 9 is, you are both forced to play a deadly game. Who is forcing you, and what's the game? I have an idea. I think Obliterator is a red herring. And it's really Ace. And what happens is Handsome McRansom is eventually able to like fix the ship well enough to sort of limp to the Mercenaries R Us base. So Ransom semi-fixes his ship and limps to the Mercenaries R Us base to see what's happening.
Is Obliterator still there because the teleporter pad isn't working to get back?
Yeah, exactly. So Obliterator is still in this base, and Handsome McRansom appears in this base looking to see. He's got his like pistol out, and the scarf is wrapped brilliantly around his neck. And he takes off his pilot's hat and says, "Cynthia!" and runs through the place. And over the PA system as the door locks behind him, and we see Obliterator too, sort of over Cynthia's body, but then the door locks behind him too. And Obliterator's like, what's going on? And Ace, or a Ransom is, who's there? I know Obliterator's here. Where are you? Come out, you bastard. And it turns out that Ace's voice comes over the loudspeaker, the PA system, and says, "Oh no. It's not Obliterator who's your real problem. You're always looked at as the best pilot in this company, and I can't abide that anymore." And it's Ace over it, and like what happens is he like starts filling the place with gas or something.
Oh yeah.
And so
But there's one gas air purifier on the floor between them.
Well, I wanted them to end up having to work together, actually. Like the thing
that's
is
even better. That's way better.
They had to like they like get to a doorway, and they're like talking, yelling through the doorway at each other, and it's like, I know we've always had our problems, but now we have to work together, otherwise we'll both be dead. And so that's, they have to like work together to stop the gas and get out, and then track Ace down to have their revenge. So that's what I think
takes us to the climax. That's fabulous.
Mercenaries are us base to see what's happening. He thinks the problem is Obliterator, but it's really Ace, whose voice comes over the PA system as doors lock both Ransom and Obliterator in. Ace is annoyed. Ransom is a better pilot, and starts filling the place with gas. Ob and Ra have to work together to get out and go after Ace. Yeah, so that's what we got there. So this is what we have just before the climax. Just to show everybody the little program, and you can look at that for a second. We've got a pretty good story here so far. I've got no room for the climax, so I'm gonna make the font even smaller, I think. That'll do. Okay, so now the climax card. There is an optional rule in Storyboard. There's an optional rule in Storyboard where you can choose one of the cards and match up the climax as best you can, but the standard rule is we just shuffle it again, and we just do a random climax.
I think that's the way to go.
I think that's the way to go as well. It all seems to work out anyway. Plus, that way it forces you to do something and figure out how the story works that way, which is the point of the game.
Yeah. I now wish I had been card counting so I could be like, okay, which 3 are left?
Oh, I guess I could do that. No, all right. So we have... You ready? You ready for this?
Yep.
Dun 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 dun. Okay. It's the Jack. Which is someone makes a dramatic mistake. Oh no. Who do you think it is? I feel like in my story, since it's me, everything has to end up being slightly grimdark.
Do we lose both heroes?
Or someone dies, at least. And I think what would be most interesting is if... Actually, either way could be made interesting because of the way we've set up the characters. If Obliterator dies, it could be sort of touching that Ransom actually cared about Obliterator as maybe a rival as well as maybe a friend. Mm-hmm. But there could also be... if Ransom dies, then it could also have a very similar thing, and that would be even sort of more interesting because Obliterator having a heart for maybe just because, oh, you're my rival. It's that kind of love where it's like, I'll miss screwing with you all the time or whatever.
It's like a Sherlock Moriarty thing.
Yeah. Or I was trying to think of, there are definitely characters where they like always make fun of you. Oh, have you seen Leverage?
I haven't, and I should have.
Okay, so there's Hardison and Christian Kane's character, who I can't remember right now, but they're always butting heads and sort of making fun of each other. But when something bad happens to either of them, they show their actual friendship. And I think that could be a really, really cool thing. Do you have any ideas for someone making a dramatic mistake?
I think you're absolutely right, and I like the grimdark angle of like subverting the expectation that the clean pilot character, who's clearly our hero, should survive. I think it's far more interesting if Obliterator, whose name is Obliterator, by the way, clearly the villain, if Obliterator has to accept the sacrifice of Ransom, and we see that there's been some personal growth as a result.
Yeah. So what I just wrote was Ransom, the hero, fails to fix the oxygen tank to get, or the pump or something, the the anti-poison pump. I can't spell things. All right, so Ransom, the hero, fails to fix the anti-poison pump correctly, but is able to, like, in the control room, unlock the doors and, like, get Obliterator out. And we have a very, like, Spock and James Kirk in the wall, like the glass wall. And Ransom says something like, "As I use my last breath here, you were one good rival." And Obliterator, whose name is Obliterator, makes a similar comment about, I'll miss fucking with you all the time. And
who am I going to send on all the most dangerous missions?
Exactly. And then Ransom says, like, as he's, like, choking and can't stand up anymore, he says, "You get that asshole for me and avenge my death." And then he, like, falls over, and Obliterator, we see his, like, fist clench as he goes off after Ace, as we see Ace's ship in the distance take off, and Obliterator, like, just glares and then looks back at Ransom's body and says, "I'll do that for us, my friend," and takes off going. So that's how...
I think he stoops and takes Ransom's gun. And he's going to use, and I'll do it with this as well.
Nice. Touching scene between the characters as Ransom dies.
And we've set up a franchise.
Obliterator takes Ransom's gun and goes off after Ace. Excellent.
And we didn't have to end with a sky beam or a giant army coming in at the last minute.
It's true. We did not. So, just to read through this basic story, here to finish off this first episode of Storyboard, which I think went very well.
Yeah.
So, we've got the crime kingpin, Obliterator, on his mining base, which is really the crime base, on the planet X555. We've also got the pilot, Handsome McRansom, who is the best pilot at Mercenaries R Us, and sometimes does some jobs for Obliterator. An object that we had in the story that was going to be very important was an engine part. So what happens in the story is, I'm just sort of reading it through, I'll see if it makes sense. Obliterator, as some backstory, feels like Handsome McRansom is the only one who is his equal, so Obliterator wants to best Ransom in some way, like every way, every time he sends him on a mission and that sort of thing. Ransom picks up a mysterious package from X555, as he often does, to take this package to somewhere, to deliver it or whatever. And this is to the chuckles of Obliterator. Ransom leaves the planet's atmosphere and the ship starts breaking down. The box is blown open and an L unit, which is a very important unit from the engine, falls from the ceiling. We flash back to after Ransom leaves. We see Ransom's dossier that Obliterator has, which is just way fuller than any of the other dossiers that he has on his desk, and Obliterator is pleased with his future plans. We have a flashback as we see Ransom again. He starts thinking, and it flashes back to when the item was loaded on board. Charlie, who works for Obliterator, brings it into the cargo bay. Charlie chuckles and places a timing device onto the door frame where the L unit is. He deliberately places the crate and a bunch of other things in sort of a Rube Goldberg machine to happen when the ship decelerates as it leaves the atmosphere, and that's what caused the initial explosion. As the ship is exploding, Ransom calls Mercenaries R Us, the company he works for, trying to contact Cynthia, his boss. Obliterator tells Ransom, on the other line, clearly at Mercenaries R Us, tells Ransom we won't be bothering with her anymore, because Obliterator seems to have killed Cynthia. Ransom thinks back to being in Mercenaries R Us's ops center, and the giant monitor wall, which is how you know it's an ops center. Camera zooms into an op that talks about assassinating the Obliterator. Ace, who is another pilot for Mercenaries R Us, was the person heading the op to kill Obliterator. Ransom manages to fix his ship a bit and limps to the Mercenaries Are Us base to see what's happening. He thinks the problem is Obliterator, but it's really Ace, whose voice comes over the PA system as doors lock behind both Ransom and Obliterator. Ace is annoyed that Ransom is the better pilot and gets all the good jobs, and starts filling the place with gas. Obliterator and Ransom have to work together to get the anti-poison pump correctly working and unlock the doors to get outside and go after Ace. But Ransom, the hero, fails to fix the anti-poison pump correctly, but is able to get through the controls in the control room, Obliterator out of the facility. There's a touching scene between the characters as Ransom dies. Obliterator takes Ransom's gun, says that he'll kill Ace for them, both of them, and goes after Ace as we see Ace's ship head into the atmosphere. So, that is our story. That was awesome, and I hope you enjoyed playing.
I certainly did.
Yeah. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty proud of this game because it is so sort of short, but manages to get a pretty good storyline in a relatively short amount of time, and it worked. And it's always fun playing games with you, Ansel, as well. You're an excellent storyteller.
Especially cinematic games. I feel like you and I do very well in this format.
My brain thinks in terms of cuts between shots and stuff like that. When I was writing my book, like that's how my book is written too. Each chapter is sort of a scene of a movie. So I think about that a lot. But yeah, so that was awesome. Thank you so much for joining me on this inaugural episode of Storyboard. I hope to eventually, I'll probably have people back on, so we'll see what happens.
I'd love to. Yeah.
But thank you so much. And I will talk to you later. Have a wonderful day. Ta-ta.
Thanks, everybody.
Oops. He thought he was still talking. I apologize for cutting you off, Ansel. I should have let you talk. Regardless, thank you all for watching this inaugural episode of Storyboard. Storyboard is created by Hela's Hand Productions, and you can check us out at patreon.com/Cameron Evesque Davis, which is spelled like that, Cameron Evesque Davis. That goes to my Hela's Hand Productions. We do multiple things. All my information is in the YouTube description as well. The music that was used in this production for today is from Tabletop Audio. TabletopAudio.com is an excellent place for ambiences and music and stuff for use in your games. Highly recommend checking him out. And subscribing on his Patreon is really good too, because he is excellent at prolifically creating more music and ambiences. So, next week, we have another guest. My guest next week is Eli Kurtz, a good friend of mine and game designer and podcast host, who will be joining me for that next week, May 23rd. 23rd at 2 p.m. Central. Hope to see you there. Ta-ta.